Look at this thing. Just look at it. Sitting here completely forgotten. Covered in rust, dirt, and about 50 years worth of damage. The tires are flat. The paint is completely gone. The engine has been started in decades. And honestly, most people would just walk away. But not us. Because underneath all of this mess, underneath the rust, the rot and the years of neglect, there is a 1970 trailer truck, and it deserves a second life. Today, we are going to bring it back, completely, from the ground up. Every single part of this machine is going to be cleaned, restored, repaired, or replaced. And by the end of this video, you are not going to believe it's the same truck. So let's get started. Now, before we even pick up a single tool, I want you to really understand what we are looking at here. Because this is not just a dirty old truck sitting in a field. This is a machine that was built with purpose. Built to haul heavy loads across long roads, day after day, year after year. And somewhere along the way, somebody just stopped using it. Maybe it broke down. Maybe the owner moved on. Maybe life just got in the way. But whatever the reason, this truck ended up forgotten. Left out in the open where the rain and the sun and the cold and the heat just worked on it every single day for decades. And nature does not stop. Nature never stops. It just keeps going, slowly, quietly taking back whatever we leave behind. And this truck has been sitting here long enough that the field actually started growing around it. You can see where the grass has come up through the engine bay, where the rust has spread across every panel like a map of everything this truck has been through. It's honestly remarkable that it is still in one piece. Before we touch anything, let's take a proper walk around this truck and really understand what we're dealing with. The body is rough, really rough. There are dents on the front hood. The side panels are warped, and you can see where the metal has started to completely eat itself from the inside out. That is years of rust working its way through. Starting on the surface, then going deeper and deeper until the metal just crumbles away to nothing. The cab is in bad shape too. The windows are cracked on one side, the door on the left barely opens. And when you look inside, the seats are torn apart. The dashboard is faded to almost nothing. Wires are hanging loose. It is a mess in there, a real mess. But here is the thing that actually makes me feel good about this project. Down below, the frame is still solid, and that is actually a great sign. A solid frame means this truck has good bones, and good bones means we have something real to work with. Because you can fix rust, you can fix dents, you can replace seats and dashboard and glass and all of that. But if the frame is twisted or cracked or completely eaten through, then you have got a much bigger problem on your hands. The engine bay is not pretty either. There is grease everywhere. Some of the components are completely seized. The belts are cracked and brittle. But the block itself looks like it is in reasonable shape. We will know more on once we start pulling things apart. The trailer attachment at the back is rusted solid. That coupling has not moved in a long time, and the rear lights are completely shattered. Just broken plastic and exposed wiring back there. So yeah, this is a big job. This is a very big job. But that is exactly why we are here. Now I want to talk for a moment about why restoration work like this matters. Because some people look at a truck like this and they see junk. They see something that should go to the scrapyard, something that has no value anymore. And I understand that. On the surface, that is a pretty reasonable thing to think. But I look at this truck and I see something completely different. I see the hands that built it back in 1970. I see the workers on the factory floor who put this machine together, board by board. I see the drivers who sat behind that wheel and drove millions of miles in trucks just like this one, hauling goods, moving things from one place to another, keeping the world running. These trucks were the backbone of industry. They were everywhere. And there is a kind of respect that comes with bringing one of them back, with saying, no, this machine still has life in it. This machine still has value. We are not going to let it disappear. And that feeling right there is what keeps people doing restoration work, even when it is hard, even when it takes forever, even when everything seems to be going wrong. because at the end of it all, you have given something back its dignity. And that is worth every single hour you put into it. Step 1 of any serious restoration is getting everything apart so you can actually see what you are working with. And this is where we start. We begin by removing the cab doors. These are heavy solid steel doors. You can feel just how well they built things back in 1970. No lightweight materials here, no thin stamped panels. Everything was built to last, built to take abuse, built to keep working no matter what. It is just that nobody expected it to be left out in a field for half a century. The doors come off and we set them aside carefully. They are going to get their own treatment later. We're not throwing anything away unless we absolutely have to. Next comes the hood. We try to release the latches, but they are completely jammed with rust. One of the hinges is locked solid. So we hit it with penetrating oil and we give it a few minutes to soak in. This is one of those moments where patience is everything in restoration work. You force something at the wrong moment and you crack it or bend it or break it completely. And then you have got a bigger problem than when you started. The hood finally releases. Good. Now we start pulling components from the engine bay. The air filter housing, the old belts, the cracked hoses, all of it comes out and goes into a pile. Some of this we might clean up and reuse. The rest is getting replaced with new parts. We're not cutting corners on anything critical. Moving inside the cab now, we pull out the old seats. These things are absolutely destroyed. The foam is completely disintegrated. The fabric is shredded. There is no saving these. New seats are going in, period. We pull out a dashboard panel, carefully disconnecting the old wiring harness piece by piece. This part takes real time. We do not want to just rip wires out because then you lose track of what goes where, and rewiring a truck cab from scratch is a nightmare. Slow and steady. We bag everything and label it as we go. Organization at this stage saves you hours of frustration later. Trust me on that one. By the time we are done stripping, this truck looks even more bare and raw than when we started. But that is actually a good thing, because now we can see every single inch of what we are working with. No surprises hiding under panels, no problems lurking behind seats. Everything is out in the open. And now the real work begins. This next part is one that most people do not talk about enough in restoration videos, and that is rust removal and metal work. People love to watch the paint going on at the end. They love their before and after. And I get it, that is satisfying to watch. But the real work, the real skill, the thing that actually determines whether a restoration is good or just okay, is what happens right here. In this stage, because rust is not just ugly, rust is damage. It is the metal literally breaking down molecule by molecule. And if you do not deal with it properly, if you just sand it a little and throw primer over the top, it keeps eating. Under the paint out of sight, the rest just keeps going. And one day the whole panel crumbles. So we deal with that the right way. We start with the body panels using angle grinders with flap discs, and we go to work on the surface rust first. There is something deeply satisfying about this part, even though it is loud and messy and exhausting, because you can actually see the transformation happening in real time. The orange rust comes away and underneath it is raw clean bare metal, silver and bright, just waiting to be worked with. Some areas are worse than others. There are a few spots on the front fender where the rust has gone completely through the metal. These are not just surface problems, these are holes, and holes need to be fixed properly. So we cut out the damaged sections entirely and we weld in fresh new steel. Then we grind the welds smooth until you cannot tell where the old metal ends and the new metal begins. That right there is craftsmanship. That is a kind of fork you do not see finished, because by the time the paint goes on it is invisible. But it is there. And it is what makes the difference between a restoration that lasts and one that falls apart again in 5 years. The frame gets a full treatment too. Wire brushes to get the loose rust off. Then rust converter chemical to neutralize what is left. Then a coat of rust inhibiting primer to seal it all in. because the frame is the backbone of this entire truck. It has to be perfect. The doors get their treatment too. One of them has a dent in the lower panel, probably from something backing into it years ago. We use body filler applied carefully, built up in layers, then sanded back smooth. Then more filler. Then more sanding. Over and over until the surface is completely flat and smooth to the touch. Running your hand over a panel that was dented and rough and feeling it perfectly smooth under your fingers. There are genuinely very few feelings like that in this kind of work. By the end of this stage, every single piece of metal on this truck is clean and smooth and ready for primer. Now for the heart of this machine, the engine. And I have to be honest with you here. This is the part that I was most worried about when we first brought this truck in. Because you can't fix body panels, you can replace interior parts. But if the engine is beyond saving, that changes everything about this project. The engine from a 1970 truck like this is a big diesel unit, heavy built, tough, and designed to run for hundreds of thousands of miles. These old diesels were workhorses, simple and strong and built to keep going long past the point where most modern engines would have given up. The problem is, it has not run in a very long time, and when engines sit for years, things seize up, seals dry out and crack. Fuel systems clog with old deposits. Corrosion gets into places it was never supposed to go. So we pull the engine fully out of the bay, and once it is on the stand and we can get a proper look at it, the picture becomes clearer. This engine has seen some things. We start the disassembly carefully and methodically. The valve cover comes off first, revealing the rocker arms and valve train underneath. And there's a thick layer of old sludge built up in here from years of sitting with old oil in the system. We clean all of this out carefully using cotton rags and solvent and brushes, getting into every corner, getting it properly clean, because you do not want any of that contamination going back into a freshly rebuilt engine. The cylinder head comes next. We check the head gasket, and yeah, it is done. Completely gone. New gasket going in. We also send the head off to be properly resurfaced at a machine shop, because we need a perfectly flat mating surface when everything goes back together. Even a tiny amount of warping on a cylinder head can cause a gasket to fail. And a blown head gasket on a freshly rebuilt engine is one of the most frustrating things that can happen to you in this hobby. So we do it right. The injectors on a diesel this old get cleaned and properly tested. A few of them have partially clogged nozzles from old fuel sitting in the system. These get professionally cleaned and flow tested before they go back in. New belts, new hoses, new thermostat, new water pump. We are not cutting corners on anything that keeps this engine alive and running properly. These parts are cheap compared to the labor of pulling this engine out again if something fails down the line. We replace all the seals. Front main, rear main valve stem seals. Everything. Fresh gaskets throughout. Then we clean the block itself until it shines bare clean metal. Beautiful. Reassembly is completely methodical. Torque wrench on every single bolt. Proper torque sequences on the head bolts, because you have to tighten these in a specific pattern and to a specific torque value. Otherwise the head can warp under heat, and you blow that brand new gasket before the engine has even done 100 miles. Fresh oil goes in, fresh coolant, a new fuel filter. And then we lower this engine back into the bay. It fits perfectly, of course it does. It was made for this truck, and it is going back where it belongs. And now we reach the part that everybody has been waiting for, the paint. This is the moment where everything that has come before it all comes together, and the truck starts to look like something again. We have spent days getting every panel straight and smooth and rust-free. And now it is time to lay down the color. The whole truck gets a coat of high-build primer first. This does two important things. It gives us a surface that we can sand perfectly flat, and it seals everything underneath, protecting all that metal work we have spent so long doing. We sand the primer down with fine grit paper until the surface feels like glass under your hand. Then we wipe everything down, every single surface, with a tack cloth to remove any dust particles at all. because one tiny piece of dust under your top coat shows up like a crater when the light hits it just right. And after all this work, we are not having dust craters in our final finish. The color we chose is a deep plastic red, the kind of red that 1970s trucks were famous for. Bold without being flashy, rich and deep. The kind of color that says this truck means business. This is not a show truck. This is a working machine, and it looks like one. The paint goes on in smooth, even coats. First coat goes down and we let it flash off properly before going back in with the second coat. And you can see the colors starting to come alive as those coats build up. The richness of the red getting deeper and more saturated with each pass. It is a genuinely beautiful thing to watch. Once the color coats are down, we apply the clear coat. 3 coats of clear. This is what gives the finish that deep white glossy look. And then we wait for it to fully cure. And then we wet sand the clear with very fine paper to knock down any tiny imperfections. And then we polish it by hand until the truck starts to glow. That deep red paint catches the light and throws it right back at you. The cab, the doors, the fenders, everything matches perfectly. This truck looks brand new. Actually, it looks better than new, because the restoration work that went into it is more careful and more precise than any factory production line. Now we put it all back together. And I have to say, this is genuinely one of my favorite parts of the whole process, because this is where you start to feel it coming together as a finished thing. The restored doors go back on the cab, hinges freshly greased. New door seals fitted so they close with that solid, satisfying weight that old steel doors have. New glass goes in, crystal clear, no cracks, no chips, no film of old dirt, just clear bright glass. Inside the cab, the new seats go in first. We went with seats that match the original style of the era. Bench seat upholstery in a color that complements the red exterior. It looks period correct and authentic. The way it would have looked when this truck rolled off the line in 1970. The dashboard gets restored. We repaint the panel and fit new gauges where the old ones were cracked or completely dead. Then we carefully reroute all the electrical wiring. New fuse box, new switches, everything clean and properly connected. No loose wires, no taped together joints, everything done properly. A new steering wheel goes on, classic design. Large diameter thin rim. The kind of wheel you would expect to find in a serious working truck from 1970. New headlights go in at the front. Seal beam units correct for the era. New taillights at the rear. All the chrome trim pieces are polished or replaced. The engine bay gets its finishing touches too. We dress all the hoses with new clamps and add a fresh air filter and clean every surface until the engine bay looks as good as the outside of the truck. New tires go on the freshly painted black wheels. We lower the truck off the stands and onto those fresh rubber tires, and we step back and we look at it. There is always a moment in every restoration where you stop and you just look at what is in front of you, and you try to reconcile what you are seeing now with what you saw when this thing first came through the door. A few weeks ago, this was a rusted, abandoned, forgotten machine sitting in a field, rotting away. If nobody had stepped in, it would have kept rusting until there was nothing left worth saving, until it was just a pile of crumbling metal being slowly absorbed back into the ground. And now look at it, that deep red paint, that clean straight body, those black wheels, the chrome trim catching the light, the windows clear and bright, not a single spot of rust anywhere on this machine. This is what it looked like in 1970. This is what it was always supposed to look like. This is what it deserved to look like. And now comes the real moment, the moment of truth. We get behind that wheel, we turn the key. The starter motor cranks, and that diesel engine fires up. It rumbles and settles into a steady idle, deep and powerful. The sound of something big and mechanical doing exactly what it was built to do. After all those years of silence, this truck is alive again. And I cannot even begin to tell you what that feels like unless you have been through this process yourself. That is the thing about restoration work that keeps pulling people back to it again and again. It is not just about fixing machines. It is not just about making old things look new. It is about preserving history. It is about taking something that the world forgot about, something that had value and purpose and a whole story behind it, and giving it back its dignity. This truck was built in 1970 by people who took real pride in what they made. Skilled workers who showed up every day and put their hands and their knowledge into building something that they knew would last. This truck lasted. Against all the odds, it lasted. And now it is going to keep going. Because we gave it the chance it deserved. The work is done. The truck is alive. And every time this engine rumbles to life from here on out, it carries with it a little piece of every hand that ever touched it. From the workers who built it in 1970 to the hands that brought it back right here, right now. That is what restoration is really about. And that is why we do it.